Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Zalze Golf Club and the Investec Business Breakfast, Unpacking the Budget for 2020. Thank you for joining us this morning. First of all, a welcome to our hosts. We'll be speaking about various topics, but first, before we get to them in an introduction, I'd also like to welcome the team from Investec. The team from Investec is right in front of me at the main table, Yiga van der E, Ladine Ludik and Colette Smart. A great big thanks to Colette Smart for putting this event together with our marketing manager, Karen van Litzenborg. So a great big thanks to them. Ladies and gents, I then would like to now call up Yiga van der E just to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Alfie. I think yesterday before the budget we all were a bit afraid and everybody was very negative. But after all, it wasn't so bad. We'll see how the implementation goes. We've got very competent people here this morning and they will tell us what they think. So sit back and enjoy it, and there'll be breakfast served afterwards. Thanks.
Well, ladies and gents, I'd like to now introduce you to our hosts. On the far right, Dr. Piet Krokamp. Far left, my left, your right. Dr. Piet Krokamp. Dr. Piet Krokamp has been teaching various subjects related to the state and the economy for 24 years at 3 universities. His academic interests have been conflict and violence and contested confines, including electoral systems and liberal democratic experiments. He teaches at both undergraduate and postgraduate level, and more than 20 students completed advanced research, masters and doctoral, under his supervision at various universities. His research has been published in national as well as international academic journals. Piet holds an MA from RAU and a PhD from University of Free State. He was presenter of various radio and television programs with political content as well as television series on mega agriculture. He has delivered more than 300 presentations on politics, economics and agriculture over the past 5 years and is a regular commentator in the national as well as international media. Welcome. Professor Mohammed Karan is a professor in agriculture economics at Stellenbosch University. He graduated from Stellenbosch with a BSc Agric degree and later completed a MSc Agric in 1994 and a PhD Agric in 2006. He joined the Development Bank of Southern Africa as an economist and thereafter joined the Rural Foundation as head of research. In 1996 he joined Stellenbosch University as a lecturer in the Faculty of Agriculture. In October 2008 he became Dean of the Faculty of Agri-Sciences at Stellenbosch University and reappointed November 2013 for a second term. From 1 May 2014 until 31 May 2015, Prof. Karan served as acting Vice Rector. Prof. Karan serves the public sector in various capacities, holds numerous directorships and received multiple awards, the most recent of which was 2018 Agricultural Writers SA Special Award for Lifetime Contributions, Personality of the Year. So welcome to Prof. Mohammed Karan. And then Elizabeth Fick. Lizzie Fick is an admitted attorney, currently busy with her Masters in Taxation. Before joining Investec, Lizzie worked as an associate at Maitland Legal Advisory, global law firm specializing in international tax and planning. She also acted as client relationship manager and trusted advisor to many clients in Maitland's trust and fiduciary business. Lizzie joined Investec Wealth and Investment in 2018 and specializes in tax and cross-border planning and structuring at Investec. She has vast experience in the drafting of local and offshore wills, estate and succession planning, trust and company law, local and offshore trust and company administration, exchange control regulations, tax law and opinions. Welcome, Lizzie. Professor Brian Cantor. Professor Brian Cantor has had a long academic career at the University of Cape Town, where he served as lecturer and professor of economics and dean as faculty of commerce. His career includes stints as a visiting professor at Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, and Columbia University Graduate Schools of Business, New York, 1994. Brian has served on government boards and commissions, has consulted within the financial arena, and held directorships at various listed companies. This diverse experience spans South Africa, the United States, Canada, and Hong Kong. Brian's research at monetary and financial economics has been widely and frequently published. He has received accolades for various business achievements, including his work as founding chairman of the V&A Waterfront Company, 1988 to 2001. Brian is currently head of Research Institute Investec Wealth and Investment. Brian's published books, South African Economic Issues, New to Cape Town, 1982, and Understanding Capitalism, Boyers, Boadine, New York, London, 1996. Get South Africa Growing, Jonathan Ball, Johannesburg and Cape Town, 2017. We would like to welcome Prof. Brian Cantor. Welcome. And a familiar face, Stu Venter. Stu Venter is a political and policy specialist at the Northwest University School of Business and Governance, and was previously special advisor to 2 vice chancellors of the Northwest University from 2004 to 2016. In this capacity, he's advised on politics and strategy. He's also a political commentator on South African politics in the media, especially on radio and TV since 1987. Stu Venter received an award as Agriculturist of the Year for the Northwest for 2015 from the journalists in the agricultural sector. He has been one of the most quoted members of the Northwest University academic staff in the media from 2011 to 2017. He attended the ANC National Conference as resident analyst for Netwerk 24 from 16 to 21 December 2017 and participated daily in newsprint, internet, radio and TV. Early in 2018 he completed a project with Theo Forster on scenarios and business decisions for CapeNet. He teaches a course in the formulation of strategy in the postgraduate diploma program of the Northwest University Business School. His main research interests are scenario methodology, political change and policy development. Theo had obtained a master's degree in political science at Potchefstroom University in 1982. From September 1982, he also studied political science as a Fulbright scholar at the Nelson Rockefeller School for Public Management at State University of New York in Albany. Welcome to Stu Venter. Welcome. Right, ladies and gents, and then just unpacking the budget, just to run through the program. We will have a panel discussion, which I'll now hand you over to. After that, we'll have a Q&A session. I know that I think we're running about maybe 5-10 minutes late, but a Q&A session was planned for 8:45, and then our club captain Clive Hewitt, a couple of thank yous with Hichu, and then breakfast at 9:15, and network photographers, photographs with Soca Media. So I'm now going to hand you over to Dr. Piet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I attended the budget yesterday in the National Assembly, and I forgot my shoes. So I had sandals on when I arrived there, and the policeman there at the door, he said to me, "Sir, you don't have shoes on." I said, "No, but I have sandals on." He said, "But you must have shoes on." I said, "But," and I looked around and there was a woman who also had, a Liverpool shoe on. I said, "But what about her?" He looked at me and said, "Yeah, you're already wearing a kopdoek. I guess the shoes is good then." So I entered with my potties on. I'm delighted to be here. What I will do is, I will not necessarily ask a question and somebody answer the question. That I would like to have a bit of a discussion. I must say, at least 3 of the 4 people sitting here, I don't expect them to be snappy and, excited about a lot of things. But I hope that they will do their best today to. It looks like most of us are spending your taxes for the last year, just by the bulk that we have here. In any case, what I will ask Elizabeth to start for me, just to give me a broad overview of how she's seen the budget, and then the rest of you can call in, but I will from time to time just keep you on track if you deviate from what we expected to do. Okay, good. Elizabeth.
So I think the budget surprised us all. Everyone, I think, went in with quite a negative sentiment, thinking that we're going to see VAT increases, we're going to see CGT increases, personal tax rate increases. So we were pleasantly surprised when actually none of those came through. So just if we run through high level, personal tax rates aren't increasing. What they have done is that they've increased the brackets for inflation, so they've catered for inflation, which means that for the average man on the street there'll be more cash in their bank account. One of the interesting things was the transfer duty exemption, which they lifted as well. They said that corporate tax rates they're going to be looking at, and they're going to be bringing in relief for the small businesses, so making it easy for them to transact. And they've realized, they acknowledge that our corporate tax rates are incredibly high compared to the rest of the world, so they're going to be looking at bringing those down over the next 12 months, which I think will bring in some much needed relief. On the small business side, I think yes, they can bring down the taxes, but there are other things which I think are impacting the small businesses more. So if the hope is on the small businesses, Eskom keeping the lights on probably means a little bit more to a small business. Unfortunately, our sin taxes are going up. That's to be expected. Booze, cigarettes, all the usual. I don't know if those of you who vape will now be taxed as well. And then we will be they will also be looking at some tax compliance. So trying to improve SARS, trying to improve the systems. They mentioned that they'll be looking at taxpayers who've been avoiding taxes more closely. So I think there'll be a little bit of scrutiny coming on taxpayers. But more interestingly was the comments made in the budget about exchange control and the relaxation of certain exchange control regulations. I think that they've realized it's a major deterrent for South Africans. It's frightened a lot of South Africans, and it deters foreign investors from wanting to invest into the country because they're worried their money's going to be stuck here. So I'm sure we'll get into that detail a little bit later.
Brian, there are many elephants in the room, Eskom being one, but there's another one, and that is, what do you think Moody's will say the 27th of March when they look at this budget?
Yes, that's the question that dominates discussion. Not clear. They've got to believe, Moody's will have to believe, as we will all have to believe, that the government will deliver on its intention to cut spending on salaries and other employment benefits of its own officials over the next 3 years to the order of 260 billion rand. Effectively, it means inflation only increases. So we're able to reduce the inflation outlook. It's quite important from that respect, from over 5 to 4.5 over the next few years. And this is obviously something the COSATU and other unions will try and avoid. And that is the essence, really, of it. We've got to be able to believe you can cut spending. They sensibly, or the government sensibly, has not attempted to raise more tax revenue. So tax revenues will be flat, and in real terms decline. So they recognise that actually, you can't squeeze a stone any more than a stone.
What about growth? Because that's the one thing that I think the ratings agencies have complained about in the past, that they, especially with the medium-term budget, but also in the SONA, they said that there's not enough incentive to really get the economy growing. There's talk about it, but there's nothing structurally that will make it possible.
No, the economy is not growing, hasn't grown.
Will it
much.
grow? Will it grow?
Well, it's not expected to grow by the authorities. So only less than 1% a year GDP growth over the next 3 years. So the planning horizon is really 3 years. No growth, really, expected. Now that's a terrible state of affairs. I mean, that's a big part of our problem. And it's a big part of the budget's problem. Revenues aren't growing because the economy is not growing.
I'm going to ask you.
Yes, and there's just another point. Nominal GDP, that's real growth times inflation, is only growing at about 5%. And the tax take is less than 1%. So for every 1% growth in nominal GDP, they're only expecting about 93 cents of extra revenue. So that realistically, that's being very, very realistic. But it's a big part of the problem. I mean, why is our economy not growing? What's wrong? What's wrong with it? Well, we can go into a long discussion. But the reality is, it's not growing. It's not expected to grow. What the budget really surprised us with was the realism. Said we can't raise taxes, and we've got to correctly cut spending, especially spending on salaries and other employment benefits that have grown fantastically over the years. This, if you're wondering, how did we get into this mess? Well, there are two main factors here. We paid people who work for the government very generously more. We're talking about 40% increase in real, I think it's salaries in this case, real salaries over the last 10 years. 40% increase in real inflation adjusted. And then the other, we've spent 160 billion over the last few years, 8 years or so, keeping ESCOM afloat.
I want to ask you a little bit later what you would think, what you would do to, how would you advise when we need to get the economy going. But I want to ask you quickly, it seems like cutting wages in the civil service is almost an ideological point that the minister makes. Because it goes right against the grain of the unions and the agreement that's in place until 2021. Do you think, and that's where I doubt it, do you think Peter Mboweni has got the support of the president to push through with this thing in the discussion with the unions?
Well, the short answer is yes. The long answer is the following. There's a golden thread going through several things that happened over the last 6-7 months. It started with the SONA after the election last year. Remember last year we had 2 SONAs. It is linked to the document that was published by National Treasury. Let's call it the Tito document, about how do we restructure this economy. A very important document, a document that eventually got buy-in from within the ANC. And then, of course, that golden thread was taken through to the medium-term budget policy statement. What Cyril Ramaphosa did in his second SONA last year, he cut down the expectations in terms of what government can do from a list of cut and paste stuff like we got used to Zuma, where the SONA is everything about anything, to 5 or 6 projects, really. He kept to that little golden thread. That document went through the Cabinet Lekgotla. It manifested in the January 8th speech, which nobody really paid attention to because it was in Kimberley and it was a little bit awkwardly managed for a party that would like to create a capable state. So that wasn't a very good show for a capable state. It went through the SONA and it manifested in this budget. Now I was privileged towards November last year, end of November, to facilitate the Northwest government, which few of you would know, but it is still under administration. So although I facilitated the executive, that means the Premier with all the MECs, the administrator was also sitting in there, and everything they had to approve had to be signed by the administrator. That's how a province operates that's under administration. And the one thing they had to discuss in November last year already was a 7 billion rand savings in the Northwest province over the next 3 years. So they already had their instructions. The stuff that we now see on the budget, they already had it in November last year. And now these guys, MECs, are typically the leadership of the party in the province. They have to decide, what can we save? Where can we save? And jointly they came to the conclusion, the only place where we can save is on people. Salaries. Now there I heard the story that the negotiations between the government and CUSA, to Piet's point, and to political mandate, is that government went to COSATU saying, guys, we made a commitment in terms of salary increases, what Brian referred to, but we're only going to pay those increases in the next 2-3 years at the level of 750,000 a year and lower. We're not going to pay those increases to those guys earning more than 750,000 a year. And COSATU is now, well, I think Tito has got COSATU by the short hairs at the moment, because it's impossible for COSATU to battle for the fat cats. Trade unions can't do that. And I think they will be able to get that kind of savings through. So my point is really, yes, Tito has got the political mandate from Cyril Ramaphosa, and they've got the mandate from the NEC. I think they can pull it through. For me, this budget was a budget about we're in control. We're trying to establish a climate of confidence. This is really what we're trying to do, a climate of confidence, to see if you can do something about the economy. You are far more qualified to go into the detail of the budget. For me, it was a statement of confidence.
But just your point, you also gave a little bit of tax relief on the lower end. That's also
part of it.
I'm just like to ask Mohammed, you're also in the Planning Commission. This budget, is it compliant with ideals of the Planning Commission or the National Plan, or do you think it undermines the plan to some extent because of its lack of capital, because of the investment in the debt of state-owned enterprises and stuff like that? Is the money spent at the right places in terms of your plan?
There's very little alignment across the world, in fact, between what governments want to achieve through their national plans and a national budget, strangely. The last time they tried that kind of alignment was in India, where you have a National Planning Commission driving a national plan and making the point to the president that they have to align the budget to the plan, and the National Commission was fired in its entirety. So, it makes sense to try and align the budget to the plan, but it doesn't. However, the good thing about this budget, and I'm in the presidency a couple of times a month, is there sufficient independence of the National Treasury, the Minister, and his top bureaucrats from political interference? In other words, is this budget apolitical? And if I look over the last 10 years, I would say the relief about this budget is there is not much political meddling in what they're trying to do. The one big connection that I make with this budget, tying in with the State of the Nation address, is that he's trying to follow what the President said, which is get the fundamentals right. Every budget is a transition from the past to the future, so it's a balancing act, it's a compromise, and I think Tito did the best he could under the circumstances. He's trying to get the fundamentals right, and it's essentially two things that he has to balance. On the one hand, he's trying to fix the economy, but he knows that he's going to fall short, but he's transitioning from a bad past to hopefully a better future, and the budget itself cannot get the economy moving. You have to look at his economic stimulus paper, which I think is a fantastic paper and gets into the practicalities of how you get the economy going. The other thing that he has got to get right is how to fix government, and it also falls somewhat short. And by his own admission, he said, I'm not going to go into austerity. So I'm not going to cut salaries, I'm not going to cut jobs and so on, but I'm first going to try and establish a discipline in government. And I think he's getting it right from a fiscal management point of view, but you've got to look at it as a transition. In other words, what is he going to do next year and the year after? If you take a 3-year view on it, I think this is a fantastic start.
Right, Elizabeth, there's just one thing I would like to ask you quickly. There are two things that I think is just theatre. and I might be wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but there are two things that I think is just plain theatre, and I don't think there's any substance to it. But I might be wrong. Just tell me quickly. The State Bank and the Sovereign Fund. What is the rationale behind that? And is it possible?
Yeah. Well, those are more than theatre. I think that's ideology, and that's a very important influence. The sense, sustained sense that the state is the solution. So that's what we live with. I would say fundamentally that's why we're in the difficulty we are in, because the state is not the solution. Solution is individuals, private enterprise, business. I wrote a book about that, how to grow the economy. Those ideas are not accepted. Believe in the development state. Believe in the capacity of the state officials to turn around failing institutions and to regulate and to manage better than they have done, and they've done hopelessly, as we know. But that has not dissuaded the ambition. I mean, what is State Bank? Compete with the banks? What's that about?
Well, I think it's different. I think the State Bank, I mean, it can't compete with commercial banks, not even with the Post Office Bank. But I think what they're doing here, there's something else behind the State Bank. Government has about 10 institutions with banking-like characteristics. One is well known now through the Zondo Commission, the Free State Development Corporation, that tried to fund the Airbus project. Remember that? Then there's the Northwest Development Corporation. Then there's the Limpopo Investment Corporation, and then there's similar things in the Western Cape, similar things in all the provinces. They were really part of the old dispensation where each homeland had its own little investment corporation, and after 1994 the names changed, but the stuff really stayed the same, and they act like banks, development banks. What I understand is government wants to consolidate all of those into one institution, calling that a state bank. In other words, now looking a little bit like the development bank, because the development bank changed its face from the old development bank to what is really now an infrastructure bank and a piggy bank for Eskom from time to time. So this new bank is not going to be a commercial bank like having ATMs and stuff like that. It's a consolidation.
They will take deposits, that's the one thing. The other thing that I wonder about is, will the governments move its provincial and departmental accounts to this bank and away from the commercial bank?
No, they can't.
Why not?
I think that's I must say, this is a bit of a distraction. And it's a bit of, I think it's a bit of theatre, you said. I think we need to put the problems of South Africa into context, which perhaps I didn't do before. We have a debt problem.
A huge debt problem.
Well, it's more than and this is the point. We need to understand it's more than a debt problem. It's paying interest on the debt problem. So if we go on this path, which we're on now, even an improved path, because it aims to cut spending, and this is essential to the purpose. You can't raise revenue, you've got to cut spending to try and improve this path and to stop interest spending overwhelming the budget. So it's grown from 10% of government expenditure, it'll be close to 20% on the current path. So a fifth of all spending is just keeping your debt rating. And your debt, and now this is the key point, your debt rating is very inferior. If we were in Europe and we had a 70% debt to GDP ratio, it would not be a problem at all because interest rates would be 1% on that debt. South Africa, it's 10%. You can argue, and I would argue, the main purpose has been to satisfy the interests of those who work for government in one way and another. That's the overriding consideration. Hence, huge increases in government spending on people who work for government at all levels. At all levels. And at the most disgraceful levels also these semi-autonomous government authorities. The directors' fees, everything. So, and then you say, well, is that just an accident? Or is that actually the political intention? It keeps us in government. It helps our supporters. Well, we've got a big job to do in this country to convince the world that we will manage our affairs prudently. And ideally, we will do the stuff that can lift our economic growth rates from a miserable less than 1%, it's quite hopeless, to something like 3 or 4% a year, which given our resources, if we could use our resources well, and given the abundance of underemployed or unemployed labor, why can't we do 3 or 4%? But that's,
Mohammed,
we're not doing it.
I must apologize for these bunch of capitalists with you on the program because I associate with you. Right? I honestly think that part of the problem with the government is that you have 10.2 million people unemployed, and you have 70% of the population who really need the state to in some other way intervene to empower them. It's not just a matter of leave it all to the free market economy and the problem will be
The state
solved.
kept them unemployed, if I may say
Okay, so,
Yeah.
wait,
Who
capitalist
do you
voice.
blame for unemployment?
Mohammed, tell us, why is the state important in all this? And I agree with you before you talk.
I've known this man since I was at university, so I know not to take him too serious, and to be very careful when he tries to characterize me as coming from a certain... I think the important point to make here is that it's important, we can be critical about what government has done, and I'm one of those who believe that the ruling party has mismanaged the country and the economy over the last 10 years or so. And I don't think anyone will disagree with that. I don't think that Moody's is going to move us to junk in total. I think the message that comes out of this budget is that you have a minister with the guts to cut spending on important things like education and health and move it towards debt relief. And that's the message he's giving to the market. He can only move so much in 1 year, and he will move, I think, more aggressively or progressively in years to come.
He's still there.
Yeah, and that's really the message to be sending to the market. I'm prepared to do that, and we've not heard from Labour or anyone on the left side of the spectrum complaining about that. I don't think there's a contestation these days anymore, ideological or otherwise, that the economy is in trouble or not in trouble. I think everybody knows how bad the situation is, but everybody also knows that the situation in South Africa is bad, but there are few other places in the world where they don't have the same kind of challenges. Everybody has got those challenges. South Africa is still a country of opportunity, and there's still opportunities to not only create jobs, and you can create jobs in large numbers, but if you manage it properly. And that's the minister's biggest worry, is you can make the plans, but can you actually follow through and execute those plans? I must say, when you listen to the commentary from across the spectrum, last night, this morning, there's very little negativity about it. Everybody's more or less on the same page. We've got to get this out. Maybe except Alfie.
That's more for the court. Just tell me about exchange control. That was a big surprise. Why did he lower exchange control yesterday? And then also, if you buy your first property, you're exempt from taxes. Why do you think he made provision for those two things?
I mean, I think it comes back to what Prof and Tu has been saying, is that they need to create confidence, and I think and they need to convince the world that we can fix this. And at the end of the day, you have to eat an elephant bite by bite. So you're not going to be able to solve the problems all in one budget, and you're going to have to do it over a staggered approach. And I think that for taxpayers, I mean, if I think back to some of the conversations that I've been having with clients, 90% of it has been about, I'm terrified, things in this country are going to be locked, my money's going to be stuck here, I need to externalize cash. And money's been flowing out of this country like you can't believe. And I think that they've recognized this. that people are scared of exchange controls, that they don't want to invest into this country because of exchange controls. People are relax them, and capital can at least flow in without those fears. It's the same for taxpayers who are scared that their hard-earned cash is going to be stuck here. And so I think it was a step in the right direction to say, actually, you know what?
But in anticipation of a possible downgrade, isn't it, to make it easier to capital?
Exactly. So trust us, you know, and one of the things that was interesting, they mentioned that they're going to change the system from exchange control, from a negative system, so a negative cash management system in the sense that nothing's allowed unless you request permission, to a positive one in the sense that we will allow everything bar a few transactions. And so I think we're going to be seeing a lot of those changes coming through. I mean, specifically one small thing that they mentioned was IP. I mean, I don't know how many of you have had to externalize your business's IP, etc. I mean, it used to be a nightmare. They mentioned, you know what, if you're selling to a non-related party, your IP can simply flow. You don't even need permission for that anymore. So I think it's very positive for South Africa. Another interesting thing which may be relevant to the audience is the expat tax. So they used for South Africans who earn revenue abroad, there used to be an exemption. They then subsequently capped that exemption to R1 million, which triggered a lot of fear-mongering as well, where people said, oh, the solution to get out of this tax and not to be caught by this is immigrate. So immigrates, I think they saw the number of immigrations increasing, they saw cash flowing out of the country, and I think that also triggered a lot of the exchange control relaxations to say to people, you know what, actually, immigrating is not going to solve your problem.
I think that's the way I think about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question here, and then it will be your turn. So get yourself ready if you have a question for any of the panelists.
On the exchange control.
Yes.
I think it's symbolically, they talk symbols. I think that it's a very helpful symbol. Well-run countries do not rely on capital controls. We've relieved them quite significantly, but not really changed the nature of the system. You need permissions, and you've been getting permission, and that's been very helpful, I think, to development in South Africa. It helps keep productive people inside the country, discourages immigration. You can realize wealth in this country, and you can insure against misfortune by investing abroad, but you do so under permission, which is now changed. Now the rule is you can do what you like with your capital. This IP stuff, those of you, I mean, Cape Town, Western Cape, quite buoyant on the IT side, software development and all that. It's intellectual capital. Now, how do you realize intellectual capital? Well, you sell to a foreign buyer perhaps. Now you can take the proceeds and invest them abroad. That is a great encouragement. I like that. I like that thinking very much. I think it's good for us. It shows maturity. Capital controls look like a solution. As we used to say, we don't export our capital, we just export our children. And maybe this encourages commitment.
I want to ask you one question. Is it a coincidence that the money provided for bailing out SAA is also exactly the amount that the government assigned surety for? In other words,
yes,
they actually just pay the debt. It's not really money that there's money they couldn't have expected. They will have paid.
Yes, no, it is guaranteed debts of SA Airways. 16 billion now to perhaps clean up the balance sheet. But what happens next with SA? Do they run profitably, or do they continue to make losses and have to be bailed out? To the extent of 32 billion of losses over the last. That's where we've gone so badly wrong.
I think like we would say in Northwest about SAA, event by West. I think SAA is going in one direction. It will end up very similar to what happened in India, where India sold its national carrier, but it said to the seller, to the buyer, we want you to maintain the profile, the image, the brand. So whoever buys SAA or whoever takes it over, you must still have this flag on the wings and so on and so on. I foresee that SAA will in future become an airline that only flies internationally, that they can compete locally as Mango versus Kalula versus Safair, whatever. There's enough space. There may be room for another one, but I think the SAA that we knew is a dead duck.
But the flight between Joburg and Cape Town is not national, it's international.
Maybe it's international, and maybe it's the only one that will work, because if you have a capacity of 80% on your seats, you're making money.
The oil revenue problem, the cost problem, like every other state entity, the costs exploded. How? Employment benefits. I mean, SAA, and that's what the union are against. They know, the unions know private ownership means tighter control over costs. Otherwise you go out of business. Well, if you're a state entity, you don't go out of business. And that's been the problem, so the benefits.
But you also talked yesterday, you also talked to his other minister, to Willem Tash yesterday, by re-emphasizing the need to, for instance, in the case of Eskom. It's interesting, a while ago, suddenly Willem Tash, who keep this reins on Eskom, said, but you must sell SAA. And a lot of people said, but where the hell does that come from? Because it's a contradiction to what he's doing at Eskom. But I know Titu is a small farmer there in Tshwane. Abos and Willem Tash, he farms with a few sheep and a few cattle there in Elliot. And the two of them came together, them both being little farmers, and they Titu just dropped it, and Willem Tash just bought the idea without thinking really. It's interesting how some of these big decisions are made sometimes over a pot of beer.
You mentioned something in passing there though, by saying, if Titu is still there, let me go political. Cyril cannot survive without Titu. Cyril plays, you are rugby guys, I'm only sitting on the pavilion, you actually played it. Cyril only has a long game. In other words, you get the ball from the scrum, you pass it down, eventually you run the fly off or whatever runs out. So your game, you've got a predictable game. What Cyril needs is what this wonderful new fly off or scrum half that you've got here in the Cape, Yankees, that can break around the scrum. We call that the short game.
He's retired long ago.
He doesn't have a short game. Titu is his short game. And Titu sits in cabinet for that purpose. He's the political storm ram. He's the guy that's not scared to fly ideas. He's not scared to tweet. He's not scared for the NEC.
It doesn't need politics. Politics needs him.
So Cyril cannot survive. And talking about Cyril is at the moment at a very interesting point in his career. And it reminds me of what's happening in America. American presidents typically try for 2 terms because it takes them approximately 2 years to understand how to be president. Trump, it took a little bit longer. And then in your 3rd year, you really starting to govern, and then you start making mistakes, and then in your 4th year, you're preparing for the next term. So you're at your strongest in the 3 years of your 2nd term. Because in the last year of your 4th term, you're a dead duck again, or lame duck, flow mako in Afrikaans. Now, in South Africa, we've got 5-year terms. So Cyril is approaching the 2nd half of his 1st term. And he's now starting to prepare. If you listen to his speeches and he's talking ambivalent. He's talking ANC politics, ANC ideology, and he's talking reality on this side. So you must always listen carefully what he's talking about. He's preparing for the 2nd term. I think if he can sustain his 1st term and he can get re-elected as president, hopefully with a different deputy president this time. But if he can sustain that, his strongest position would be in the first 3 years of his 2nd term. Because remember the ANC, they haven't synchronized the election of a party leader with a national leader. There's always that 18 months lag. So Cyril will in all probability in the last 2 years of his 2nd term fall the same kind of victim that Zuma and everybody else before them have to leave early.
Any questions from the audience, please? And if you don't respond, then you have to listen to me ask another. Yes.
We were looking at the official figures for trade unions yesterday, and much to our surprise, the COSATU being the strongest was only 312,000. and the second one was something like 260,000. It's such a small number. Why is it a bother at all? Why is all the play about what will the trade union say?
Yes, only about 20% of formal labour in South Africa is unionised. If you take government unions out of it, then you're down to around about 12%. But in, say about 10 years ago, COSATU could get 1 million workers in the street and have a massive margin that will have a political impact because they had numbers, they had authority, and they were in the tripartite alliance. They've changed their strategy because they are smaller numbers, like you say. But now they use a very, very different, a much more efficient strategy. And that is, for instance, at ESCOM, they say, we can't march, but we can sabotage. So we will gooi 'n bak moer in 'n turbine, then we see how you provide electricity. So that destructive capacity to sabotage is much more effective than the previous or the past one, where they could actually just march. But if you have something about that?
There's also a structural change that happened in the unions. And that's one of the legacies of Zuma. The breakup of COSATU, the fact that NIMSA went out with Mr. Irvin Jim, and they established themselves on the left side of the political spectrum. COSATU is remaining with only one union that sits in the private sector, and that's NUM, National Union of Mine Workers. For the rest, all the other unions are government or service-related unions. So COSATU suddenly does not represent this holistic part of the economy that they used to. And I think that is part of the answer. And the unions that are with COSATU at the moment, you're correct, they're a little bit more destructive. Nehavu and all these guys, the guys that throw over the dustbins and so on. And so there's somebody once told me that if you put all the English curse words together, you get a new word. And that is called disconfocculation. And I think this is what's happening at the unions at the moment. They're a little bit disconfoculated. They're not exactly sure how, because Piet's correct. They used to live in this paradigm that they can actually force government to do things that they want. I don't think they can do that.
I just want to apologize for his language. Any other question? I hope it answers in some other way. Any other question? Are you hungry? You want to eat? Okay, just one last question for me. There's a lot of positive vibes around this budget. A lot of people think it's a very, very good budget. Davy wrote this morning and said, think about debt as future tax, which means actually your taxes have increased. Somebody's going to pay this tax, whether it's you or your children, somebody will pay this. But the fact that this tax has been postponed will determine the behavior of a lot of people and policymakers in the future. Is that where we're heading to? What do you say, Brian?
I would say, Darby, it all depends on what happens to interest rates. So the judgment will be made. If we get things right, if he delivers on the expenditure reduction, perhaps, I mean, the budget speech and review full of good intentions. It's actually an impressive document, incidentally. I think the Treasury we can be quite proud of our Treasury. It's highly professional and it presents itself very well, and it has lots of good intentions, which one only hopes can be fulfilled. But getting the budget into line, getting a sense that we're in control of the debt. We'll see interest rates come down 2 or 3%. If people believe that inflation in South Africa is under control, say inflation is only going to be 4 to 5%, if they're going to meet the target. Interest rates, government interest rates should be no more than...
But inflation is because of low demand, isn't it?
Well, but we're planning for I think it's a realistic estimate that inflation. Yes, it is. I've got a critique of the Reserve Bank. That's something else. We could have lower inflation and faster growth and attract more capital if we have faster growth. You come back to growth. But in the short term, or the next year or so, we could get expectations in line, more favorable expectations of what the South African government will be doing. And we can get interest rates down. And there's another point. The South African government, it would appear, and that's important, is not looking to capital controls. Though there's something that surprised me a bit, but I think it's a bit premature. There is going to be a deal between the pension funds and the government on government and Eskom debt. The pension funds are a powerful instrument that could be used to actually clear out the Eskom debt and swap debt for equity. And the equity might have actually reasonable prospects, Eskom equity, reasonable prospects, if in fact they would manage better.
Why don't they say something about, because I think, you know, we hear this often, this argument here, and I think that might be the only way out, but why don't we hear it from government that if they plan to do that, why don't we, because that is a feasible way of dealing with it.
Yes, because SARTA actually came up with the idea. And the idea of forcing pension funds to do something is not an attractive idea. It's not what governments do. They don't force savings. They don't force investment. They allow pension funds freedom. I mean, those are our savings. But I think there is room for a deal. So, somehow you've got to get the debt off Eskom's books.
At least 250 billion needs to get off.
Yes, the interest rates. Then Eskom suddenly is profitable. It's got cash. It can pay dividends and so on. It's this incubus. It's what's happened in the past, and you've got to try and somehow write off the past and start fresh. My only concern is that do we have the competence? Do we have the officials who can do the job? And so far, not so good. Hence the argument for privatization. You can't live in a dream world. You can't look for reforms and better management, and better this and new schemes for that, unless you've got the people who can do the job. And I think we clearly, as yet, we don't seem to have the people.
They make more money available for the NPA and special investigative units. It's as if they would like to at least root out the rock if they can't make people more efficient.
Yes, that was a promising thing on the national. You want an honest prosecution. I mean, country's been riddled with the most extreme forms of corruption, and the courts are there. Present the cases, and we'll discourage. Why do people steal? You know why they steal? Because they think they can get away with it. That's it. If you think you can get away with it, you steal. And it's not confined to South Africans. Unless you have good controls, you get corruption. So that's part of it.
Somebody else with a question, perhaps? Otherwise, we're going to wrap up. There's one there. Good. There's a mic coming there.
My question is, last year there was a lot of noise, and even Tito was tweeting about it, this nationalization of the Reserve Bank. What is that about? Could you maybe just give us a bit of insight from your side, and is it possible that it could happen?
Well, there was, I think Tito Mboweni, his fixed position is leave the Reserve Bank out. And one of the things that are happening following NEC meetings nowadays, and Cyril Ramaphosa did it the other day, he made the announcements. The independence of the Reserve Bank now is not a debate anymore, at least not in the ANC. When you hear it, you hear the one faction talking to the other faction. And that's part of understanding South Africa, that a lot of the time when the ANC is talking, they're talking to themselves. They're not talking to us. They're talking to themselves because they have to manage this funny animal called the ANC, where half of them, or at least half of them, don't really agree ideologically with the other half. And so there's the big fight in this country politically is in the ANC. Sorry to say that to the DA and all the other guys. You are there, you do a good job, but you're not what it's about. What it's about in South Africa is that internal battle.
I would add that's all. I think the worst theatre, the Reserve Bank is independent. That's a reality. Setcher is a very strong personality, very strong. He defends and has defended against the sort of radical element. He was magnificent in defense of independence, of his own right to set short-term interest rates. Now, we need a long time. I think his judgment has been seriously flawed. Interest rates at the short end in South Africa would make sense 200 basis points lower than they are. It just doesn't make sense. An economy that has no growth, no spending growth, no growth in credit, should have interest rates where they are. They've been rising in real terms. So the interest rates relative to inflation, rising. They should be cut. They may well be, that's really interesting, because the coronavirus actually in a way means lower interest rates around the world. So there's more room now, I'd say, even for cuts, but we need them badly. Though, it's no point stimulating demand unless you can increase supply. And you can't increase supply very much unless you can keep the lights on. Now,
There's a question there. I just want to say one thing about it. It's a good question. It's not going to go away. The National General Council meeting with the ANC will be in June. It will come up again, because it was a policy decision that was taken at the leadership conference, and it's expected, usually with the National General Council, they revisit policy and its implementation, so it will come up in some other way again. Yesterday, Titu affirmed the independence of the bank. He made a point of stating it, but you're quite right, you will hear about it again and again and again. I don't think under the current regime much will change, but you will hear the question within the ANC, as you said, they keep on talking to themselves. Ysmakashule is not in jail yet, which he probably will be by the end of the year, or at least in court, then that will certainly be an issue again. Yes.
There's one question that I think was omitted today, and that is the question about taking land without compensation. Where do we stand with that, and what does it look in the future?
He's on the panel, the president, he must be able to say something.
Can I leave? There's really a political intention behind it. And the intention politically is not for a land grab. The intention politically is to show to the supporters of the ANC and the supporters of the EFF that we've got the power to change the constitution, and that the constitution is not that sacrosanct, but you've got to change it for the better, not for the worse. And everybody gets quite nervous about that. But there is one important reason why I supported the change of Article 25 in the Constitution. The real question is, do they want to really affect a large land transfer from white to black? Politically, yes. The truth is, the focus is really on urban land, because that's where the need for land as an asset is currently. And that's likely what you're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years, that there'll be large land transfers for urban housing. The land transfers in terms of agriculture, you can just look at what the state has done. They bought 4,500 farms across the country, spent almost 60 billion in obtaining that, and of the 4,500, 90% of them are dysfunctional, and the state doesn't know what to do with it. Now they want to hand them out for free. But even if they do that, it's going to make no difference to the economy of agriculture. So they know that expropriating agricultural land does not solve a problem. It might solve the problem in terms of shifting the dial a little bit towards black ownership, but it does not solve the economic problem, it does not solve the labor problem, the employment problem, and everything else that goes with it. So it's a little bit of a red herring. You've got to chase it politically, but economically it makes very little sense.
There are two things that you have to listen to. The one is, in terms of the brief of the ad hoc committee, what is implicit in the Constitution must be made explicit, which means the Constitution doesn't change. It's almost like Almin du Plessis calls it a verheldering. That's a very, very important thing. So all of you think, don't change the Constitution, you actually get what you want, even though they will adjust the wording. It's not possible now, in terms of theory, if not possible, to change the constitution different from what it was. It must have the same implication and the same meaning eventually. The second thing that you have to listen out, and that's where Zalze Maposa has a really, really big problem. And in the SONA, he again said that if we will make it possible to expropriate land without compensation, there's a big difference between without compensation and null compensation. Without compensation is political jargon. It means I can just take the land if I want to. Null compensation means there's a legal process behind me, there's a very specific bureaucratic process, there's oversight, the legal oversight, which means it is exactly what we had in the past. I wait for the day that Zalze Maposa must explain to the ANC that null compensation and no compensation is not the same thing. And the other day on Twitter, Jimmy Manye, or Mzwanele Manye, was flabbergasted. He big poster, he said, do you know that null compensation is not, null and no is not the same thing? He realized it about 2 weeks ago. Wait till the rest of the members of the ANC realize that null compensation and no compensation is not the same thing. What the ANC has propagated, and the president was no compensation, he kept on saying it in Parliament, he said it in the SONA, there's no reference and no indication that they're going after anybody's property in South Africa. Don't believe that much.
Huge potential in the cities for land transfer. I mean, the state is a major landowner, municipality, major, look at Cape Town, sitting with redundant, vacant land on a huge scale. Well, it takes proper government to
Thank you very much. I hope the coffee is beautiful. I hope the food is very nice. Thank you for coming out, and I hope we in some other way contribute to a better understanding of what's going on. I'm not too optimistic about that. But I want one last point. This is not about your house. Where's the Stellenbosch Mafia? It's not about your house. Thank you very much.
Draailoop, ja.